Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua's weight has reared up as an issue again after his coach Rob McCracken addressed the issue directly with the BBC. I'll get straight to the quotes, a few thoughts on whether some misdirection is at work here, plus a couple of things Steve Bunce of the BBC has had to say about Joseph Parker. So McCracken, he told the Beeb the emphasis is on being as quick as possible and taking as little punishment. A bit lighter would allow him to do that. He's a bit lighter at the minute. He's probably eased off a bit on the conditioning side of things strength-wise. We do 12 weeks for his fights, so I can give him some days off during the camp here and there as we go. He's done 4 weeks with me in London before Christmas, boxing and cardio. So he's in good shape, sharper and a little bit leaner than he was of late. And McCracken says the week leading into a fight, when Joshua eases his huge training load to rest, it would be monitored more strictly than we did in the past. He says it's about finding what was comfortable and effective for Joshua, but he feels there was a need to develop his movement over the next phase of his career in a bid to be the dominant boxer in the division. Some very interesting things there, which I will get to in a moment. But first, doesn't this strike you as the first real piece of news or insight that we've had from either side, either Joshua's camp or Joseph Parker's camp, in a while? I mean, we've been treated largely recently to a screed of stories which are being recycled and then repackaged the next week as so-called fresh news. Just think, the themes are broadly Anthony Joshua's so-called glass jaw, that Parker will expose him. Parker's promoter or trainer belittling Joshua as the most overhyped fighter in recent times. And then Joshua on the other side saying he'll make Parker pay in the ring when they get in the ring. And then, of course, we've also had that Parker has a granite chin, never been dropped, etc. It's all been rinse and repeat. But this weight thing with Joshua, and it being fed to the BBC, so that ensures wide coverage. It's interesting for me. And it's not necessarily something that we as fans haven't been ruminating over since Joshua took on Carlos Takam at a career heaviest of 254 pounds back in October. But it is practically the first acknowledgement that the weight is becoming more of a problem, that it is an issue that they want to address. But the timing of the admission, this is the thing that strikes me. This is shortly before a unification bout between Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua, shortly before it's going to be announced. It does give me pause to think, is this a bit of misdirection to play here? Give Team Parker another thing to think about, to prepare for. Parker's trainer Kevin Barry, he has been talking ad nauseum, very unflattering stuff about Joshua's lack of movement and repeatedly labelling him robotic. So some of what McCracken says, it kind of goes to the heart of that and indicates that they're going to have to remedy some of it before the Parker fight. Now that's going to give Kevin Barry something to think about. Whether he believes it or not, that's another story. I mean, it is big-time professional boxing after all, so I wouldn't be surprised to see all sorts of mind games at play. I mean, especially even before the fight. I mean, I think we've already seen some of it sort of playing out with this pre-build-up. I mean, feeding this sort of thing into it, I mean, because many people do believe it's an emerging issue, it's a smart play. Give them another thing to think about. I mean, remember, just keep this in mind here, we've previously heard from Anthony Joshua, and he's very firm on this. He doesn't weigh himself in camp. He doesn't like to do it. He relies on the way that he feels to gauge what he's doing, how he's doing it, and whether he's going to continue doing it. So he's been very firm on that before. Whether he changes his sort of stance here, well, we'll have to see. I mean, we'll only know once the weigh-in happens. I mean, take a look at some of these recent shots here that I'm just putting up on screen now from social media. Does he look a bit trimmer to you? For me, well, maybe. But it's hard to tell, it really is. And remember, McCracken said they've only done 4 weeks of camp. And previously, I'd sort of tried to do this sort of thing before. This was before the Takam fight with some shots from his previous fight, the Klitschko fight, where he was 250. He was 254 for the Takam fight. and I was convinced he looked a shade leaner heading into the Takam fight, but clearly not. He was 4 pounds heavier. I mean, even in this video that's running in the background here, which he has posted in recent days, of himself swimming, I mean, it's kind of hard to say either way. I mean, if he is a shade leaner, it's just a shade. So the BBC's boxing analyst, Steve Bunce, he's weighed in on the Joshua weight of 254 for his last fight with this theory. He says, I'm convinced Joshua gained 10 pounds in the last days of the Takam fight because he was fighting a totally different bloke. Against Pulev, he would have had to be a bit smarter or faster. Against Takam, he knew he would just have to keep whacking him all night. Interesting thought, but I don't know if I buy that. So what, he completely just lets himself go in the last couple of days just because he thinks Carlos Takam might be a slightly easier night, he just has to hit him. I don't know if that really sort of holds a lot of weight. What do you make of it? But going back to the weight quotes, I agree with McCracken that Joshua is probably better if he drops a little bit of weight. He's going to move better. And in Joshua's case, if he's losing weight, we're talking muscle. And as his trainer alluded to, and this is the quote, he's probably eased off a bit on the conditioning side of things strength-wise. I mean, we've all given, or not all, but some of us have given him a bit of stick, looking like he was coming in a bit too bulky. The extra muscle is actually not going to help him. Can't put muscles on your chin, and also it can gas you out. The heavier you get with muscle, the harder it is, or the easier it will be to gas out more quickly. But even then, with the McCracken quote, and this is one of the things going back to what I was saying with the misdirection, he probably eased off. And that's what he said. I mean, it's either he has or he hasn't. So he's left a little bit of wiggle room there. So which is it? But I fully agree that for Joshua to be the dominant boxer in the division, he's got to keep working on things, and one of those is definitely his movement. He does get a little bit stiff, and he doesn't move around, or his head. I mean, there's a lot of things in terms of movement, you know, coming forward, going sideways, and obviously the head and the body sort of as well. So it's not just one thing, but just his movement in general. I agree that does have to improve, otherwise it could end up hindering him at some point. It could catch up with him. I mean, interesting though that McCracken didn't make mention of Joshua's perceived stamina issues. So there's been a lot of people that say, well, Joshua's gas tank, it's a risk. It's a bit leaky, it's not as good as it should be. Is McCracken implying here that if some of the bulk is dropped, that will help in other things like stamina as well? Didn't explicitly say that. I think maybe it would, but then again, it's not something with Joshua that it's just been a one fight thing. We've been talking for a while that Anthony Joshua's stamina, there potentially could be an issue there, and it's something he's got to address. Oh, and before I get to Steve Bunce's comments that he made about Joseph Parker, I thought it would be worthwhile letting you know a New Zealand website's coverage of this story, the McCracken stuff, how the way that they have couched it. So they've opened with, Anthony Joshua is battling weight issues as he prepares to fight Joseph Parker in a boxing world heavyweight title unification fight. Battling weight issues. It kind of just sums up for me the sort of sometime coverage that boxing does get in New Zealand. But I mean, we've already seen it here in New Zealand already. That, you know, it's very pro Parker, and some of these things, it's just clickbait stuff. You know, stuff to draw the punters in. Thank you to Mala2243 for sending that link through to that article. But the BBC's boxing analyst Steve Bunce, so he says of Joseph Parker, interesting stuff here. If we actually analyse Parker, there's a misconception that he's so much smaller, so much lighter and different to Joshua. I don't think he is. One thing we overlook is his amateur pedigree. About 6 years on the circuit fighting in major events all over the world. This guy built up a solid pedigree. This time last year, these two weighed the same. There's less than 2 inches between them. Parker has that thing heavyweights absolutely need, a jab. There's a lot more to this than the Joshua beast from Watford angle. And I tell you what, in New Zealand, all the media outlets here, they're going to eat that up all day, every day. So we're going to hear whoever comes out in support of Joseph Parker that is foreign is going to get reported on. They will get headlines here. Not a surprise, but Vince, he does raise some good thoughts there. What do you make of them? Also, what do you make of what Rob McCracken is saying about Joshua's weight? Do you think that this thing is a little overstated? And actually, we're probably going to see Joshua coming in somewhere near 254, 250 anyway. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.